All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started with our group Rainbow Coalition book study. We are going to continue our reading of Comrade Kwame Shakur's book, My Search for Answers, Truth and Meaning. This is the book here. And we are actually now into getting ready to start chapter 7, but wanted to do a little review of chapter 6 before we go into 7. So if we can just kind of go around and maybe start with Sister Annie, if you can share with us what you got out of chapter 6.
Okay. As far as chapter 6, Brother Kwame gave us more of an in-depth viewpoint of life in prison, where we have to question as far as human rights are concerned, because based on that chapter, it seems like there are certain type of rights that prisoners supposed to have, and one that deals with respect and dignity. But based on the mannerism from the officers there, it seems like it was more of a conquer, control, and destroy type of behaviorism, in which you have to question if the facilities are really geared to show some form of correction, or to manifest a evil type of attitude for other people, like correction officers, to be more aggressive. And based on what we have read, it seems like these officers really want to break the spirit of the detainees to a point where they are so submissive, and they are, they have no rights. And it's just walks out exactly what's going on of those who carry a badge. They are not there to protect and serve. They are there to control. Mm-hmm. And is something that we have to really, advocate those people who supposed to not advocate those people, but really stand in support of the people who are behind bars, and see, is it worth those individuals, or those people who are supposed to be officer of the law, peace officer, who are in a right position. We have to look at the training, the quality of training. We have to look at their background, where it seems like it's more of a glamour thing of them carrying a badge and feel like they more in power than them actually serving their position. Black power.
Thank you, Sister Annie. And I just want to say, we'll do the quick review and then we'll go into the statement of unity. So I kind of did those two in reverse today, but we will be going into that here in a second. Brother Rafa, were you present for chapter 6?
Yeah, and I remember, and I agree with the sister right now, because she nailed it. It's all about control, and just judging from what happened this week in Memphis, where they released that video. You still have police officers and liberals explaining how we, trying to not justify, but they're trying to tamper down and make it sound like, well, we just got to do this or got to do that, and they're still talking about controlling Black and brown bodies, or anybody for that matter. That the cop, they got trigger happy police, and so I feel you nailed it right there. It's about control, and it doesn't just happen out in the streets. That's sometimes what we see, but in the facilities, like Kwame's book, there's a lot we never see. A lot of times there's stuff that goes by that becomes, and from what I understand too, second nature, where we don't see and we don't hear but should be no surprise to anybody who's been incarcerated. So you nailed the sister.
Mhm. Yeah, you
Right.
have to have a strong mind. You do. And one thing I have to say, with all that taking place, it's like, who do we really call for emergency help when we see there are officers or cops who act like murderers, who are murderers? Who do we call for emergency help?
Right. Right. Or it's some sort of a toss-up, whether you're going to get somebody who comes out and is half decent or not. We kind of saw that in the chapter kind of play out when he was taken into or being taken to the SHU. And it was like, okay, he anticipated some violent attack on him. And then, to his surprise, it didn't happen. But then it happened to another person, another inmate. And so the psychological torture of, is it coming? Is it not? That sort of thing, where you don't have that consistency even. But yeah, chapter 6 was pretty intense. And all of our group readings are downloaded on the YouTube channel. So we want to just encourage people to share, to like and subscribe to that channel, so that way, we can, anytime that we miss or want to share with others, we can do so. Chapter 6 was definitely pretty intense. Chapter 7 is a little bit differently. It's a little bit lighter, which was kind of refreshing in a way. And so, Brother Kwame, I really enjoy your style of writing, and in the introduction, you had kind of explained a little bit about, the way that you do this to, just kind of tell stories simultaneously, that present moment, and then also going back into your childhood and how you got there. So chapter 7 does go more into middle school age. So it is definitely lighter reading. But does anybody else, Nick or Brother Kwame, do you, either of you two, want to share anything about chapter 6?
I mean, I could talk all day about in response to all the things you guys said, but I didn't actually read chapter 6, so I'll save mine to the end after we read chapter 7.
Okay.
I'm sure it'll still be relevant.
Yes, and thank you,
Yeah.
Nick, for joining us today and for helping us out with our technical aspects of the show. We couldn't do it without you, so thank you.
Oh, I just want to mention, as we know, Sister Leslie, she had personal time off, tended to our family matters, so she's not with us today, but spiritually, she is here with us in heart, mind. And we just want to say we love you, Sister Leslie, and we can't wait for you to join us next Sunday.
Yes, thank you for that, sister. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Brother Kwame, did you want to mention anything about chapter 6?
Yeah, chapter 6. Also, I wanted to highlight how the supermax units are. A lot of people don't realize in prison, there's prisons inside of prisons. I was just telling someone the other day that a lot of people don't understand, like a lot of the people that's getting out of prison that had to endure those supermax years of torture. And I even put in there about Human Rights Watch. They did a report on the SHU and MCC in particular, and they was talking about how it's causing more problems, and it's not a deterrent against people in prison. It's actually causing psychological torture, and when these people are released, they fear that this is sending people out to the streets that's even more damaged. So I think the public has to understand, like, how this is contributing to the overall degeneration of our communities and stuff. If people coming out of prison broken, you know what I mean, they coming out bitter. They're coming out psychologically damaged from the dehumanization and degradation that they went out endured in there. How does this affect even the criminal stuff that goes on here in our community, which I like Veronica, what she said, this is really a part of that colonized mentality. You know what I'm saying? But it comes and it's reinforced in a way where people come out a lot more violent. So people need to really understand like why these units need to be shut down. They're against even international laws. You know what I'm saying? And that's one thing I wanted to highlight and give a person a picture of, because, you know, we see a lot of murders happening more frequently in our community, but we not even tying into the fact that some of these people are getting out and their humanity was taken away from them. Their empathy was taken away from them. So when they come out here and they go back to their same lifestyle, they come out even more violent, you know what I'm saying, than they went in. And this is something that people, I think the community needs to really understand. Because if we don't start targeting these type of institutions within inside prisons, we're setting up our community for greater failure. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Especially when you have briefly mentioned, brother, about the healthcare situation, because I am a big advocate when it's coming to universal healthcare for everyone. And when healthcare is denied in the prison, it's not something that we should not care about. We should be more involved with and advocate, because it will reflect on the family as well as the community as well as the world. And besides that, it's amazing. A lot of money is being forwarded into these prisons, where a total to house over, just briefly, over 1 million prisoner is over $42 trillion. I don't even know what that looked like, but yet our country say we broke. We are broke. Look at that. That's a money-making business right there, and it's outside of a funeral business.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, so I think, again, chapter 6, to reiterate what both of y'all have said, is that the violence and the psychological tactics intended to control the colonial subject and also break the spirit, you know, Sister Annie, like you had mentioned earlier. And so, you know, even for people who look at it from a standpoint of some sort of reform, in that there's no reform. There's no reform, there's no healing, there's no addressing. And in fact, like Brother Kwame, you just mentioned, it's actually making things worse. But another aspect that I want to point out from chapter 6 was Brother Kwame's first conscious reading, and what that process was like with the brother who was pretty persistent. And we had a conversation about that, you know, meeting people where they're at and how important that was. You know, Kwame resisted pretty much, you know, pretty strongly for a minute there, reading anything that was anywhere associated with any kind of consciousness or any kind of Black power or any of that. And so the first reading that he did was Visions for Black Men by Naeem Akbar. And then he also referenced the New African Prisoners of War Journal, the Vita Wawa 2 Journal 11, which there are 12 of these notebooks, but Journal 11 in particular, you referenced, Brother Kwame, because it was one of your first readings as well, and that one delineates 3 of Fred Hampton's speeches. And so in chapter 6, we see that. I wanted to see, Brother Kwame, if you wouldn't mind, because I know last time you read this part here, and if we can have you read page 71, just that one paragraph that starts with when I read the speech. Just that paragraph, you pretty powerfully, and I know you mentioned when you do your book tours, that's part of parts that you like to read. So if you could just read us that paragraph, that would be awesome.
Okay. All right, let me go down to it real quick. Actually, let me go get a copy of my book and read it straight from the book.
Okay, take your time.
All right.
Yeah.
Like
I thought he was getting it. Go ahead, brother.
yeah, like Veronica was saying, that's the part I read every single time, because this was the transition in my whole life. Like coming across Fred Hampton, reading his speeches and learning about the original Black Panther Party. So without understanding this part of this book, it's hard to understand how I came to who I am today. But so here it goes. Just that paragraph, or the last two paragraphs of that subsection.
Just the one where you say, it starts off with, when I read the speech he gave in 1969.
Okay. It says, when I read the speech he gave in 1969, titled Power Anywhere There's People, I immediately took a strong liking to Fred Hampton. The fact that he was 21 years old when the government had assassinated him, and I was 21 years old myself at the time, I could relate to him. Even though I was only reading his words was having a powerful effect on me. I had been a rebel without a cause for a long time. When I came across Fred Hampton, it felt as if my cause had introduced itself to me through his charisma. I never heard anyone speak like him, not even Malcolm X. At the end of his speech, he said, we in the Black Panther Party, because of our dedication and understanding, went into the valley knowing that the people are in the valley, knowing that our plight is the same plight as the people in the valley, knowing that our enemies are on the mountaintop to our friends are in the valley. And even though it's nice to be on the mountaintop, we going back to the valley because we understand there's work to be done in the valley. And when we get through with this work in the valley, then we got to go to the mountaintop. We're going to the mountaintop because there's a motherfucker on the mountaintop that's playing king, and he's been bullshitting us. And we going up to the mountaintop, not for the purpose of living his lifestyle and living like he lives. We got to go up to the mountaintop to make this motherfucker understand, God damn it, that we coming from the valley.
You know, he was so gritty and to the point. He's a realist. That's what I love about Fred Hampton.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Brother Kwame, actually, if you can, go ahead and finish that next paragraph too.
Okay. I was impressed. I wanted to learn more about this unknown leader no one told me about, as well as the original Black Panther Party he was a part of. I learned in that Beta Wawa 2 journal about the free breakfast programs that the original Black Panther Party had. I learned about the street organizations, and a number of them had worked alongside them. Also discovered that the FBI had pitted other street organizations against the Panthers to disrupt the good work they were doing in the community. I hadn't heard about any of those things in the schools that I had attended growing up. I wonder what else they were hiding from me. I was determined from that day forth to study everything I could. I started realizing that there was a whole lot they didn't tell me about during my formative education in school, or should I say, miseducation in those schools.
Word.
Yeah.
I really like that part because, like you said, Brother Kwame, this part right here, what was a pivotal moment for you, so we start off in the chapter where you're really resisting, doing much reading at all, to this point where you're like, I was determined I was going to read any and everything that I could possibly get my hands on,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed that chapter 6. And before we go ahead and get started with chapter 7, we'll go ahead and read the Statement of Unity. And I think it's a good segue, particularly because what we just read kind of goes into that. So does everybody have the Statement of Unity, or does anybody have it handy?
I just want to let you know that it's also in the back of the book as well.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's in the back of the book. So if they don't have it, or are able to pull it up, it's right here in the back of the book on Appendix 2. It's always good to read the back
Yeah,
and work
yeah.
your way up. And
I had not made my way to the back.
yeah, I don't cheat to find out what happened at the end, but it's always but sometimes it's tempting.
Okay, yeah, I do see it. Okay, so for those of you who have the book, it's on page 266, appendix 2.
Or they want you to put your hands up.
Anyway,
Okay, does anybody want to
They
volunteer
have
to
a
read
gun.
this?
okay.
You on? You got to mute your mic, Hashid.
Okay, thank you. Oh, you're unmuted again. Brother Hashid, you want to mute yourself?
I don't know. See, when I minimize, I can see y'all. Let me log out and log back in because I can't even see the
Okay,
mic.
brother.
I
Okay,
see it now. I see it now.
all right. Does anybody want to volunteer to read the preface of the Statement of Unity?
Okay, Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. The legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates
Oh,
back
sister?
to the
Sister, we'll go back. So we want to read the preface first.
the preface first. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No
Okay,
problem, no problem.
the Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. Preface. The U.S. was founded as a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, still in the lands of the indigenous nation, breaking every treaty made with them and confining them to reservation concentration camps. As the country became more powerful, the LG sucked its claws into other nations, making war on Mexico and grabbing its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and either annexing them outright or making them colonies or neo-colonies. And in the 20th century, it became the major imperialist power in the world, exploiting both the people with its boundaries and those in every other country, bullying them with military intervention and robbing them of their rights to self-determination. As Huey P. Newton stated, we have two enemies to fight, racism and capitalism. Between the two, capitalism is primary, racism is a byproduct of capitalism. The working people of the world of every ethnicity or nationality face a common enemy that is destroying life on earth. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We must have our basic needs met to live a good and meaningful life. Food, shelter, healthcare, education, freedom from oppression by the state, and peace with other nations. To obtain these essential things for life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably. So
Thank
the statement,
you.
oh, you're welcome. You want me to go ahead or?
Yeah, you can go ahead, sister, if you want to continue reading, yes.
Okay, Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. The legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates back to its foundings on April the 4th, 1969, by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords, and Young Patriot Organization. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterward, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Raising Up Anger, the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses have developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against this capitalist imperialist system in various ways around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the first Rainbow Coalition. This historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton of the Minneapolis chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated that at the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a race struggle. He said that it's a class struggle, God damn it. By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and its masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. The class solidarity equipped them with the material basis and class consciousness to see the common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rules and subsequently use the entire repressive forces of the state, police, courts, jail, prison, and intelligence agency, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14, 2021, with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model of the united front that will best serve our class liberation by upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriot Organization, and all other original Rainbow Coalition members. We established our pragmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all of the organization and our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representative of the capitalist imperialist ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party and Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their class intention and interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationality, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structure, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Hashtag all power to the people. Hashtag boots on the ground. All members of the coalition. New African Black Panther Party. American Indian Movement, Indian Kentucky. White Panther Party. Green Party of New Jersey. Poor People's Army. La Mesa Nacional de Brown Berets Party, which is the feminist uprising to resist inequality and exploitation. Also is the Guardian Rebellion. Is there any other groups that I need to include? Because it's not saying it in the book.
Yeah, this is like a year old, so some of these groups like American Indian Movement's not on there, and also the only other groups, real quick, I'm about to go to it real quick. It's New African Black Panther Party, White Panther Party, Green Party of New Jersey, Poor People's Army, La Mesa Nacional de Brown Berets, Fury, Nassau, New Era Young Lords, and Guardian Rebellion. Those are the current members.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Brother Kwame. The 6 disciplinary rules. 1, members will conduct themselves in a manner to bring credit to the coalition and will treat others with respect and politeness. 2, members will be sober when on Rainbow Coalition businesses and will not engage in any criminal activity while a member. 3, no member will engage in violence except in the extreme of self-defense. 4, members will not gossip nor be divisive to the unity of the Second Rainbow Coalition. 5, members will not act informers nor work against the purpose of the Second Rainbow Coalition. 6, nobody is authorized to speak for the Second Rainbow Coalition unless authorized to do so. Is there anything else I have to read, or is
That was it. That was it, sister.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you. Thank you.
welcome?
All right. So we will go ahead and get to the actual reading. So chapter 7 is one of the shorter chapters in the book. But we'll go ahead and get started. And then after, we're going to go ahead and read it all the way through. And then after we read the entire chapter, then we can go ahead and share reflections, comments, and questions. Okay. Does anybody want to volunteer to start reading? And if not, I can go. Okay. Chapter 7. GTC Boys and Lincoln Middle School. In 1989, my mother and stepfather moved our family to a housing complex off of 71st and Georgetown Road called Georgetown Crossing. We were some of the first Black families to move into that neighborhood. There were still a lot of dirt lots when our house had been built from the ground up. I liked the area because it was new and there was a lot of terrain to explore. Next to our complex was even a large wooded area that we could traverse and play in. Most of the kids around me and my brother's age were white, but we all ended up becoming best friends. That's when I met Mark Yater, Sean Cody, and Chris Goen. We were all into sports, so we often pulled all the kids around our age together in the neighborhood and played basketball at Mark Yater's house. He lived on a cul-de-sac with the basketball court that his family had installed for our use. No matter if we were in school or if it was summer break, we would all normally meet at the cul-de-sac and play 21 or teams. Mark had an older brother named Matt. He probably was my toughest competition, so we always played against each other to make it more fair. I loved when Mark and I were on the same team because while I liked driving to the hole to score, he would post up somewhere around the three-point line to knock down them three-pointers. His whole family were huge Pacer fans and loved Reggie Miller. That's why anytime he knocked down a three-pointer, he would yell out, "Boom, baby." If we weren't playing basketball together, we would either play football in the backyard of Sean or Mark's house. They lived right next door to each other. Again, because Matt was one of the older kids and was one of the formidable football players, he and I normally played against each other to make the games more fair. If you ask me, I think I was the best football player in the neighborhood because of my aggressiveness on both offense and defense. Those community games made me a lot more confident when I would play in my little league games for Atkins Boys Club. What I enjoyed most about hanging out with my white friends in the neighborhood is whenever we would go off in the woods and play war. The woods near our neighborhood was so huge that it was the ideal battlefield for pre-teenage kids around our age. During summer breaks, you would find us at times starting off playing basketball, then transitioning to a few football games, and then later in the night playing war in the woods. We literally hung out every day just about and did everything together. This group of white friends of mine made me look at ethnicity differently, I think, than people who didn't grow up with this diverse experience. The fact that I straddled two worlds early in life, the Black urban environment and the suburban mixed environment, I started accessing people based on how they treated me. I had the same love and respect for my white friends as I did for my Black friends. We would sit around and talk about all kinds of subjects which bonded us together. Besides Mark Yater, Chris Gowen and I had gelled together like peanut butter and jelly the most. We mostly kicked it with everyone else in our neighborhood, but Chris and I would go to the skating rink together often. One year, he even played for Atkins Boys Club's football team with me. He was a tough white kid who was just as tough as the rest of us. I think hanging around him started to influence my attraction for white girls, since we would find a lot of the same girls attractive anytime we would go fishing for new girlfriends. I used to be nervous to talk to pretty girls, so whenever we went skating, I would have Chris to play my wingman. Sometimes he would walk up to the girls that I liked while she was alone and let her know that I was interested. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. We were both virgins, so all of our quote unquote relationships were over the phone for the most part, except anytime we would meet them at the skating rink. I remember the time Chris and I got into a discussion about how women got pregnant. He told me that with the utmost confidence, looking me straight in my eyes like he was the expert on the subject, and said, "If you pee in a girl, that's how you get them pregnant, bro."
Wow. Okay.
I think I was in the 5th grade and he was in the 4th grade around this time. I didn't know how women got pregnant myself, but I told him that I truly didn't believe that that's how women got pregnant. But after he said that, I figured I would make sure I didn't pee in a girl when I started to have sex, just in case. When I when I entered Lincoln Middle School, that's when a lot more Black people started to move into our housing complex. Our first real GTC boys, which stood for Georgetown Crossing Boys clique, formed when Clarence and Leigh Scarborough moved into our neighborhood. Soon after that, or around that same time, Donnell Johnson moved in down the street from us. If you saw me in the neighborhood, you always saw me with several of them and my brother. There were other Black families that moved into our neighborhood, but that was our main crew. Besides Jarrell Williams, who years later moved into our neighborhood in high school and was one of the guys. Some of the other guys were temporarily a part of our clique, but not constants for one reason or another. I still kicked it with my white friends, but most of the time I was with my GTC crew. We too played basketball and football together, but a great deal of our time together was spent fishing in our neighborhood pond or exploring other locations somewhere on our side of town. Some apartment complexes prohibited fishing, but we would fish there anyways. I remember the time we went fishing on the property of Pike High School. I don't think we were allowed to fish there either, but we would still go because they had a lot of big fish and even a snapping turtle in theirs. On this particular time that we were up there, there was a little white kid standing around kicking it with us. All I remember is casting my line, waiting to hear a splash, but it never came. Instead, I heard that little white kid crying behind me. When I turned around, I noticed that my spinner bait was hooked into his eyebrow. I had a lot of mixed emotions running through my head. Part of me just wanted to retrieve my favorite spinner bait from his head, while the other part of me was fearful that we would get in trouble for fishing on the school's property and hurting this little white kid. Wanting to retrieve my favorite spinner bait won out though. I remember trying to pull the hook out of his head and him crying louder and louder. I don't know why he stood there and took the pain I was inflicting on him, but he did. I think he felt I was trying to help him, which I partly was. However, I really was more concerned with getting my favorite spinner bait back and not getting into trouble for this. My guys were all concerned, but also amused by it. Realizing that my efforts were futile, I gave up and told the white kid, "You can have this. Go home, tell your parents so they can take you to the hospital." I never came across that little white kid again. For a while, we stopped fishing at the pond just in case they were looking for us. Okay, I will stop there. If anybody else wants to pick up, maybe a couple more pages.
All right. Any hands?
Trying to download the book.
All right. Well, while you say that you need to download it,
Yeah,
Brother
yeah,
Rob? Okay. Well, you want me to go ahead?
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. We stayed into all kinds of shit. One summer we went around stealing mountain bikes that were left unattended. As soon as we came across another one, we would ditch it for the new one. Around that time, all the kids were into who had the newest, tightest bikes into my 8th grade year. That's when we upgraded and started buying motor scooters in our neighborhood. This little white kid named Brandon was the first to get a motorbike. After that, me and Clarence both got one of our own. You couldn't tell us we weren't the shit. Sometimes you would find us speeding around the neighborhood like we control the streets. We were definitely the coolest kids in the neighborhood. Everyone respected us and feared us at the same time because we were known for being the one getting into fights and trying to make a name for ourselves. The first time our clique got our own community gun changed not only how people began looking at us, but it also changed my reputation in the neighborhood. One summer, we all went into Apple apartment near 52nd and Georgetown Road. An older guy named Brad, who was the street cat, ended up beating up this little dude. Somebody ended up calling the police on him. So not to get arrested with his gun, we went and stashed it in these bushes. Clarence saw him and came back and told me. After the police arrested him, we went back to where he stashed his gun and took it. None of us had ever owned a gun in our lives. Now we had a 22 caliber pea shooter with a pearl handle and a lot of bullets. That changed everything. I remember I had gotten into it with one of the older guys in our neighborhood around that time. I think we got into a fight or something. I forgot. We were all walking down one of the streets in our neighborhood going nowhere in particular when this dude Ron jumped out from behind a car and hit me with a pool stick. My shoulder instantly went numb. We all took off running. As I was running, I remember that we had our community gun. I ran up to Clarence and told him to give me the piece. He was reluctant at first, but gave it to me after he took both of the bullets out of the chambers. I saw him when he turned his back and took the bullet out of it. I don't think he knew that I did, though, when he handed it to me. I ran towards Ron with the gun pointed dead at him. He immediately jumped into his car and put his hands up, pleading for his life. "Man, I'm sorry. Please don't shoot me." I have never felt more powerful in my life than at that moment. After making him squirm and plead for his life for about 30 seconds, I turned and ran into one of the white girls' house that everyone was going into to regroup. That single stunt on my part turned me into this crazy ninja in our neighborhood. Once we were all in our house, everybody started talking about how crazy and wild I was. Man, you were really going to shoot him, weren't you? Sorry, I had to turn the pages. Yeah, he got me fucked up. His brother be glad that cars drove by or I would have smoked him. Damn, you are one crazy motherfucker. One of the white girls said. After that incident, I started taking on this new persona. I wanted everyone in the neighborhood to view me as the wild, crazy ninja. I never had a problem with Ron again. Word got around to everybody in the neighborhood of what I had done, and even the oldest guy started to view me as a wild, loose cannon. The summer of '92, a lot of time was spent playing basketball on the playground at Central Elementary School. If you wanted to catch a good pickup game with the high school guys and the hoopers around the northwest side, you could always catch everybody up there after 5:30 in the evening. Since Central and Pike High School sat on the same lot of land as our housing complex, I could pass through a fence and be on the blacktop in 10 or 15 minutes walking distance. After fencing it enough, most of the regulars already knew who I was and would often pick up, even over a lot of the older guys. They saw me as an upcoming star who had a decent game. That came from all the years of playing organized basketball for my stepfather, Carl, and run into those Don Malorians and R.J. Williams over the years. I had started standing out to the guys in the street as well. There have been games where I had scored 20 points in the front of a packed gym, while packed gym under the whistle. The more points I had ever scored in a single game was 36. That was in an organized game at my friend's Mark Yazer church, and I'm sorry about this, but the team we had played against was straight burns. You want me to continue? Every day, though.
If
You
you
want me
feel comfortable, sis, you can. If you need to switch, we can switch.
Okay, what I'll do is just stop at the end of this paragraph. Every
Okay.
day, though, I look forward to catching a pickup game at the playground. I was going into my 8th grade year at Lincoln Middle School, and I was wanting to improve my skills. The year before, I had played on the 7th grade team, but I sat on a bench a lot. I had a hard time adjusting to coaches who didn't like guys who play street ball under the whistle. I was used to what we refer to as running and gunning, which was a lot like how the Fab Five Michigan Wolverines play. But I came across several Indiana University, Bobby Knight types of coaches who wanted you to always run a play or pass the ball several times before everyone took a shot. If I thought I could shake you with my dribble and weave through the defense and score, I would. If I tried that and the defense collapsed on me, I would simply ditched it off to an open teammate. Most of the time, they would be wide open for a shot since whoever had been guarding them was helping to stop me. That was what I was used to. That doesn't mean I didn't run plays too, but the dynamic of the games was more fluid rather than being so rigid and formalistic as some of the most conservative coaches wanted Black kids to play. In time, that started to really impact my confidence and caused me to be overly self-conscious whenever I was on the offensive side. And I tried to play within their parameters, but often reverted back to what I was used to, which got me right back on the bench.
Okay, Brother Rafa, are you able to pull up your book?
Yeah, I got it right here.
Okay, you want to pick up there?
Sure. Up until this point in my life, I had read only one book from cover to cover, and that was about the Fab Five. I never really had a favorite NBA team or player. My biggest influence came from the five players who played for Michigan, for the Michigan Wolverines: Jalen Rose, number 5; Chris Webber, number 4; Juwan Howard, number 25; Ray Jackson, 25; and Jimmy King, 24. Out of all of them, I idolized Jimmy King the most. I even purchased a Michigan Wolverines basketball jersey with number 24 on it, with some big baggy Wolverine shorts. I remember thinking of myself as the sixth man on the team. I started wearing the number 22 anytime that the number was available because it was symbolic of my aspiration to live within their legacy. For me, they weren't necessarily the Fab Five, they were the Fab Six, because my whole game was inspired them from there on. From the number I wore on the jersey to the college that I wanted to play one day, play for. This one particular time, I went to play a few pickup games behind Central Bucket. Central Bucket was already up there doing his thing on the court. And Bucket was one of the older guys who went to Pike and has had a nice game himself. He and I played a lot alike. He loved to shake you with his dribbling skills and score. I always liked when he and I were on the same team. One of the other characteristics about Bucket that I looked up to was the fact that he was a real street. And to me,
I say ninja.
he might not have been a big dude, but he had the confidence and demeanor of a guy 3 times his size. When the movie Menace to Society came out the following year, and I watched Lorenzo Tate's character O-Dog, I thought of Bucket. To me, he was an O-Dog on the R side of town. On the low, he was a street, and I started graphing my own persona behind. Like they said in the movie, he was young, Black, and didn't give up. That was Bucket to a T. This particular day, he really demonstrated to me. When I walked to the court and started watching Bucket play, he kept warning this white guy who was twice his size to stop following him. Every time Bucket would shake him and drive to the hole, the white dude would try to compensate by fouling him so he wouldn't score. Several times he warned the dude, but he kept doing it. A few times, I think Bucket had just been upset that he jacked on an open layup and blamed the white dude for it. However, a number of times the white dude did use his size and weight to foul him. I don't know if he thought he was intimidating Bucket, but the last time he followed him and Bucket had enough, I remember him turning around and picking him completely off the ground and slamming him to the pavement. I stood watching in amazement. I knew Bucket wrestled for the high school, but I didn't realize he was that strong and quick. After the white dude hit the ground with a great impact, Bucket started pounding him like Kimbo Slice or somebody. Nobody intervened. The court crowded around and watched until Bucket got tired of beating the shit out of him. When he finished, he started talking cash shit. I told you, motherfucker, to stop following me. Now look, bitch ass. I noticed how a lot of street ends respected Bucket. He had a social status that I wanted to possess myself. The girls found dudes like him attractive and alluring as well. A dude who could fight and had the respect of other men make girls want them sexually or even as their man. I wanted females to view me the same way. I didn't need a street end like Bucket to explain this to me theoretically. I could see how everyone either feared him or respected him in the way they interacted with him. That in itself informed me what Black manhood and being a real end looked like. And it was the definition and expression of it that I began aspiring to demonstrate myself as I started to build my own reputation. You want me to continue, Veronica? Or
If you're comfortable with it, hermanos, we can switch. It's up to you.
No, I'll go. When my 8th grade year started at Lincoln Middle School, I was a pretty good student on the paper. Ever since I began grade school, I had brought decent grades home. My favorite classes were math and science. I normally did the best in those two subjects. Of all my courses, I absolutely hated history classes. History class. It had a lot to do with me not being able to identify with the curriculum that they taught us. They would tell us about how Crispus Attucks had been the first person killed during the Boston Massacre and shit. But I remember thinking to myself, this Black ass had no business out there fighting for white people. Anyhow, most of his people were slaves. It seemed like all the Black people we would discuss in class were house niggas. And then the fact that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, for instance, had been slave owners, I couldn't find anything proud about them that I could identify with. So for me, there was a big gap between what they discussed in history class and my lack of interest in it. As long as I kept the C in history class, I was cool. Said, oh, you want me to start? Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead, hermano. We were just giggling.
Okay.
Sister Annie and I.
Asada Shakur once said that the usual way the people are taught to think in America is to each subject is in little compartment. It is in a little compartment and has no relation to any other subject. For the most part, we receive fragments of unrelated knowledge, and our education follows no logical format or pattern. It is exactly this kind of education that produces people who don't have the ability to think for themselves and who are easily manipulated. I totally agree. There was one history teacher in the middle school that I really liked, not because I enjoyed his history discussions, but because I didn't have to do anything to maintain a C in his class. I won't mention his name here, but any time I would take a test in class, I would go from one question to filling out, I will go from question to question, filling in the bubbles, A, B, C, D, and then back till I finished the test. Every time I would receive my grade for the test back, he would pass me with the C. Again, I was cool with that. I realized early on that the only thing people in society cared about when it came to school was if you had passing grades. Most people didn't concern themselves with how you accomplished that, no matter if it was your parents or adults who asked you about your grades. As long as my report card had A's, B's, and C's throughout it, I had the approval of every morning. And I
Uh,
was always, oh, good. I was always a smart kid, so some things I learned in school that had held my interest, such as math and science in particular, I would retain. Many other subjects that that didn't interest me, I would just cram before a test in order to pass it. I could remember I could remember the answers to most of the questions this way without truly internalizing it. I'm sure if I would have had to take that same test a month later, I wouldn't have been able to answer those questions and pass those tests. School taught me how to pass tests more than it taught me how to internalize information and apply it. Moreover, education for me had more to do with acquiring credentials that would help me rise to a higher station in life and financial wise. It wasn't a bridge to self-development as a person until I went to prison and began reevaluating education more holistically. Before then, school and education simply meant acquiring a piece of paper that showed that I had passed. Obtaining my high school diploma and bachelor's degree was the tangible manifestation of that superficial goal. The fall of '92, our eighth grade football team was trying to repeat what we had done the previous year. My science teacher, Mr. Smorella, was also our football coach. The Lincoln Lions had a winning season our seventh grade year under the leadership of Coach Smorella. I must say that I found Coach Morella to be one of my favorite coaches because he really invested everything in us. He truly wanted to make us be the best we could be. Besides that this was a white man who I felt genuinely viewed black and white people as equals. I never sensed one racist bone in his body. We all felt like we could come to him about anything, and he would give us his best advice. As a father figure who wanted to see us with the game of life, or wanted to see us win the game of life and off the football field. That's what I respected about him the most. Even though our eighth grade season hadn't been a winning season per se, he taught us that we should be more than good football players. We should strive to be great men. While Coach Morella demonstrated that sort of leadership, the basketball coach at Lincoln Middle School exuded a very different aura about himself. Coach Huff was our gym teacher. He also coached the eighth grade basketball team. He had this very conservative disposition about himself. I personally never categorized many people as being racist at this juncture in my life, but I felt he was. That was demonstrated to me during tryouts for the eighth grade basketball team. His speech to us after tryouts was contradictory and baseless. He told us that there would be people he picked that quite frankly weren't as good as the people he would be cutting. And cutting after he said that, I knew I wasn't going to be one of the people he was going to be picking up. And sure enough, me and a few other guys who had played seventh grade year had been cut the following year. I noticed that all the guys who had cut, who were good basketball players, were all black. The ones he kept who weren't were all white. For a lot of us, this spoke volumes and was clear to us that was all clear to us what that was all about. All right, sorry, buddy. It's kind of small.
all right. You want me to pick up from there, or you want to take over, sister?
Yeah, I could finish off. Instead of becoming demoralized behind getting cut, my stepfather put me into St. Monica's Catholic Basketball League. We went around playing all the other Catholic schools across the city. To my surprise, it was a pretty good league with a number of great teams that we played against. I went to school with Kendall Stevenson. I forgot if he tried out and had been cut himself at Lincoln, but he was a formidable player. He was our star center power forward who carried us that season. We ended with the winning season. But if I said being cut from the 8th grade basketball team didn't affect me, I would be lying. It definitely did. I was trying hard to adjust my game to their white conservative expectations, but that wasn't my flavor. The game of basketball was evolving more and more into an urban style of basketball on all levels. Even the style of dress was changing on the court to reflect the urban players who came to dominate the game. The shorts were becoming less tight and more baggy and began hanging below the knees instead of the thongs that they had us prancing up and down the court in. More and more teams were recruiting guys that were covered in tattoos and wore black socks instead of the white ones. Those sort of changes were actually controversial back then. So much has changed since then and is inconsequential now. But there was a backlash against the urbanization of basketball on all levels. When I think back to those times, I feel a lot of the Black kids became victims of that backlash. To a large extent, it had shaken my confidence. You could see that depending upon if I played for a Black coach who had embraced those changes versus a white coach who would rather select under average players than allow the game of basketball to become too Black.
Wow.
Yes, and that is the end of chapter 7.
Wow.
Yeah. A bit lighter, but then towards the end, we kind of get into some more social analysis type stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it just shows, discrimination even in grade school.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna say when growing up in Spanish Harlem, there were no white people in my area. If there were white people, it was like one family, but it was predominantly Hispanics and Blacks. And I always thought to be white, you rich. But I have lived in a transitional dwelling type of environment in which, the income was pretty much within the same range. And when we went to public school, still you can see this type of racism exists, even in the neighborhood schools, where it, prepare us exactly for what we will face as an adult once we graduate or if we graduate. And it was little that was done as far as correcting that type of, behavior, because it wasn't often reported where it would have gotten a faculty member fired, but it was more of acceptance of a norm because it was part of life and what was happening. And this just raised a question: Are we so, I wouldn't say sensitized, but so adapted to the ills of society where we see that type of behavior as a norm for a young child to grow up and accept in life until they become an adult? And then again, we can't really look upon our parents to really see or be involved because they were working class people.
Mhm.
And rarely you will have a parent to go to a PTA meeting, get involved. And it's not because they did not care, it's because of the fact they have no other choice but to work 8 hours or 12 hours and come home and be exhausted to participate in a child's life like that. And that's how children slip into the system, and not being properly educated, even when it comes down to playing a recreational game as basketball. And
Mhm.
see that they are being stigmatized, they are being singled out because of the fact, not because of their talent, but because of their skin color, And I'll never forget when it was one time when someone have nominated me to be one of these in a contest like the senior year contest as the girl with the prettiest eyes. And I wasn't thinking much about it. I didn't know who selected me. And I found out I won. And these girls approached me and said, I can't understand why the hell you won when your eyes are the color of shit.
Oh,
I never forget that. And I'm like, what? What? And I say, it was a big ruckus, a big thing, which I didn't know because I was one of those people where, I'm laid back. I'm not into all that fashion, all that crap. I told, my teacher, Miss Perez, I say, take me out of this contest. And don't you know that woman, she was down to earth and she would curse anyone else out. She said, I will not. And then she had a big meeting with everybody. And she said, let me tell y'all something. And she tried to hold herself from cursing. If anybody have a goddamn problem with Anna winning, you come and see me and we'll talk about it. I mean, she was that bow in the face teacher. And that is like one of the few teachers I know who would stand up for what is right instead of, allowing shit to happen and for us to accept that.
yeah. I am so sorry, sister, that you had that experience.
Oh,
But
thank you.
but I'm also glad that you had somebody that was able to affirm, no, we're not taking you out. We're going to deal with this.
Right. And I must say, hi, Gina. I don't know if you're able to speak in that, but we have someone who's in our audience, and, if you'd like to join in our discussion and, I don't know if you had the opportunity to catch up or to read chapter 7 and just speak about, Kwame being in school, playing on a basketball game and seeing racism for himself where your talents didn't matter, but it's more of who, a teacher will accept based on the color of their skin. And he was talking about some of the Black brothers was cut out and, the coach would, retain the white players who was the average player. I don't know if she's able to hear me.
Oh, I could hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I could hear you. I'm just observing and listening, just soaking in all the knowledge. That's all.
Oh, would you like to share something in regarding to growing up and facing any kind of dilemma or any kind of situation in your life that,
Sure.
brought your conscious awareness?
Sure. I knew something wasn't right in the world my grandfather was part of the Panthers, and my grandma was like a revolutionary in Mexico. So I guess I always had that like around me, but I'm mixed. So I like to say I'm the best of both worlds. And growing up, I was never really good enough for the Mexicans and never really good enough for the Black folks. Growing up, I liked Mexican boys, not so much now as I'm an adult, but growing up, I liked Mexican boys and they seemed to like me, but I was never, I could take you home to my mom because, you're not Mexican enough. You don't have the features, you don't have the long straight hair, or you're not light-skinned enough. And the Black girls didn't like me because I had the good hair and you're too light, you know what I mean? So that was my struggle, being mixed growing up. And then to my fate, too much of my dismay, I don't know how I ended up in Wisconsin when I was 16 and spent 10 years in Wisconsin, which is a beautiful state, but one of the most racist states I have ever lived. When I tell you, the first week I was there, I was walking alongside the Wausau River, it's what they call it, the Wausau Lake. And I was just walking. I was just taking in the scenery. I'm a Texas girl from the desert in El Paso, so water to me was something foreign. So
wow.
I'm just really enjoying the scenery and taking it in. And there was two guys. Well, it was the two couples, a guy and a girl, and another couple, and they're sitting in the back of their pickup truck, drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, like I could remember like it was yesterday. And they told me, "Why are you here?" And I was like, they're not talking to me. They cannot be. This is 2006. I know they're not talking to me. So I'm like, yeah, walking, and why are you here, you fucking spick? And they fucking spat at me. And when I tell you I'm from the hood, but I ain't never been scared a day in my fucking life. I said, this white boy's gonna get that shotgun right off the back of his pickup truck and shoot me and leave me in the woods for dead somewhere. I ran like I had never ran before. And that was the first time I had genuinely experienced racism. And I was so scared. I remember running home to my uncle, who was Black and Mexican, about 350-pound big boy. And I told him, and he's like, "Oh, hell no, who did that?" Got his shotgun and went, and they were gone. But it was, I didn't know that shit still happened today. No, I thought that shit was stuff that I read in my history books, and it was very much alive. And that was something I experienced, and ultimately why I chose to move back home was because I knew if I experienced it, my kids were going to experience it, and they did. My son was always bullied in school for being Mexican, and the teachers would automatically see his last name, and they would bring translators to school for the PTA. And I looked at them and I said, "Do you think I don't fucking speak English?" Like, I was so, like, they're like, "Well, we just saw the last name, and okay, and you thought that just because his last name is Esparza that he doesn't speak English?" Like,
Oh
it
my
was just,
goodness.
yeah, it was just the closed-mindedness and the ignorance was just, it never went away the entire 10 years, and it's still the same.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate where, like, one of the most prolific singer, Bob Marley said, "You can't judge me when you can't even see me past the color of a man's eyes." And it just brings back, other situations in which, I was married to a military guy, and we end up living in Meridian, Mississippi. You can't get any southern and dirt light than living in the backwoods of Mississippi, where it's so hot you can see the heat rise and the ground pretty much red. And you talk about racism down there. I remember when my daughter, she was sick with a cold, and my husband had watch duty, and I had to go to town to get some medication for my daughter. So my husband went ahead and asked his our neighbor husband if he can drive us to town. Now, he looked like Opie from the Annie Griffin show, with the red hair, with the freckles. And he'd say, sure, Anna. I'll drive you. And I had to, take my little girl with me because I really ain't had anyone to mind her. So I wrapped her up, and it was a problem. I call him Red. That red hair was his vehicle. Oh, no. Okay, he had a problem with his vehicle, but he was able to get us in town. So we went to town, we picked up the medication, and these guys that look like hillbillies were staring at us. And I said, Red, why are these guys staring at us like that? And he said, oh, those, crackers, they just jealous, and, they just racist. And I said, okay, I don't want to start no problem. My daughter's sick, and I wanted to get us back. And he said, we'll be all right. So he was so offended because of these guys were staring at us. Why did Red grabbed my hand and pretended that we were a couple. And my daughter, no matter how sick she was running around, and she was like running ahead of us. And then he gonna yell out, Leanna, my daughter name, come over here, my black, beautiful child. And every white person turns around. I was like, oh my God, you're gonna have us lynched here. And he said, I don't care what these crackers want to say. I mean, he was going off. So we got into his car, and then we was driving. It was real woody. You had all these trees. And then his car was like slowing down. I say, Red, what's going on? And he come and ask me, you know, do you have some aluminum foil? I say, no, why would I have aluminum foil in my bag? And he say, do you got a barrette? And I didn't know what that was because he was from Georgia. And I said, you mean a barrette? He said, yeah, a barrette. And I said, no, I don't have it. So his car was driving down, and I noticed it was 5 cars behind us, following us. Now, mind you, I was in Meridian, Mississippi. And if you don't are familiar with that area, it is not too far where those 3 freedom fighters was actually thrown in the swamp and murdered there. And I say, let me tell you something, Red. I don't care what you're going to do, but you better put your feet on that pedal, because I am not going to be swinging in these trees with my daughter and you on the next tree. So he said, yeah, because it's crazy, and it was getting real dark. And I mean, Red, he drove over 100 miles all the way to the base. And I say, ooh, thank God. And don't you know, those cars follow us all the way to that point? It was crazy. And I find, and down there, they don't take too kindly to interracial couples. And they thought we were a couple. And I swear, up to this day, they would have done something to us. Yep.
Gosh.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
So
my heart's beating right now. Just imagine.
Oh God, I thought Wisconsin was bad. Woo.
Yeah, Meridian, Mississippi. I'll never forget that. And I was down here for a year. And it's just so crazy because down there, they don't call us Blacks. Matter of fact, they will not utter that out of their mouth. From what I understand from the people that I met, you won't believe what they call us. They call us Negroes. Because one white lady said, oh, excuse me. You know, she was talking to her friend, saying, oh, I'm from God's country. And then she's going to ask me, do I live by the Negro door? I'm like, excuse me? You mean the black door? And she said, no, I'm referring to the Negro door. I said, oh, don't make sense. What the hell you saying? Sense what the hell you saying? Yeah, but it is that type of mentality and that breed of racism that still goes on, you know, which I had encountered in a very, very scary way, you know.
Yeah, it's stuff like that you just don't, it don't ever leave you. Don't ever leave.
Never. And even here, yeah.
And that's not even talking about law enforcement.
Right.
Yeah. Of course.
And these
and I'm glad you say that, Sister Gina, because like I had said at the beginning of the conversation, we have to look at the type of training, because I was reading, you know, as far as the type of training for diversity and conclusiveness, how can you take someone who probably has served in the military, probably served off in Afghanistan or in the Iraq war, bring them all the way, wait till they come here, allow them to go to the process, accept them as peace officer because of the desperation of short staff of them, and just give them a week-long type of training to deal with a community that they know nothing about. And they don't know anything about, because they cannot bring up the name of anybody that live in the neighborhood, know their lifestyle, why this person is stealing a can of tuna fish, and then want to arrest them, where every single situation don't always have to be or end up in arrest, but why not figure out why? And if they are more attuned of the community that they serve, they will understand and be more sensitive to what is going on and answer the whys. But you're not going to get that type of training, because of the fact they cops operate on a different level. And you have to look into the fraternal of organization of police. They operate on a different level, where I see right is right and wrong is right. And quite unfortunately, we've seen that. And it's a repeated episode after. That's where our Black males are being killed. And now the statistic report showing that police brutality rate number 6 for the leading cause of death among Black males.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but we have to look at if you have people in public safety, you got to give them a thorough type of training, and how they can adapt themselves to different type of culture. You can't hire someone from Wisconsin who's not familiar with Spanish Harlem and say, okay, you're going to work there after 1 week and think that that officer going to be successful.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point, sister. We have Nick. You had your hand up for a minute. I just want to make sure that we get to you.
Yeah. I was just I guess piggybacking on some of what Soul Sister had said about like training and being from the community and stuff. And I don't think it's about training.
Okay.
I think it's about the institution. The institution is there for control. They are an apparatus for social control. So whether they're a part of the community or not, although it would make it better, I think, if people were part of the community and policing people that their kids went to school with, that would make it better. But they're not here to serve us, plain and simple. They're not here to serve anybody. They're here to serve one class of people, and that
and defend property.
What?
And defend property, protect property.
Exactly. Anyone who participated in the 2020 uprisings knows that those cops were not protecting any people. They were protecting property.
Right.
And
right.
I mean, you had said something about being, they could be more successful, but what does success look like for the police, right? It's different than any of us are going to define success. I mean, I look at, the situation with Tyree Nichols, earlier this month, and I assume people saw the video, and the thing that I can't get out of my mind is how is the response to the video, right? Like that video to me was even worse than George Floyd's video. It looked just like Rodney King. And we saw the response to Rodney King. We saw the response to George Floyd, and now these are so normalized that the response is normalized, right? The response is, let's go in the street and protest, which is great that people want to go do something, but we got to look at this like the abolition of slavery, right? That took decades. It took planning and building strategy to meet the goal that you're trying to meet. I mean, that's anything. If you're trying to write a book, you have your goal, and then you figure out how I'm going to get that goal, right? And the leftists aren't doing that. Leftists are actually the one creating the political motion that the ruling class wants. The ruling class wants us to, when someone's murdered by the police, to go protest. That's exactly what they want us to do, is to just go protest, because it's an outlet of energy, and then everyone goes back home. And the leftists are the one who go plan. The leftists get together and say, what's the next protest we can plan? And it's like, yo, this ain't about protests. We have to organize. We have to educate. We have to understand, where are we trying to go? Why is it that there is the rise of the police state? And I look at it as a result of the introduction of new tools into society, right? That is what that's historically for 10,000 years plus, that has been what has transformed society, with fire, with metal, with the steam engine, with the cotton gin, whatever tools it is, that's what transforms society. And that's what changes relationships between groups of people, and between the working class and the bourgeoisie, right? And right now we're living in, exactly, Rafa, tech today, right? We are living in the most rapidly developing society ever that humans have lived in. And the ruling class has the ability to produce without the need for us, period. They have electromagnetics, the microprocessor chip, robotic arm. They have laborless production. They don't need us anymore. That's why they are growing this fascist police state to hold property relations together. And it's not like, this ain't the 1960s. A march ain't gonna do it. It's not about getting some bill passed. It's not about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act or accountability or whatever that's called. That would be great. That might be a little better, but we just have to keep reminding ourselves of, like, what moment are we in, and what is our goal, and what's the political motion we need to get that goal, and what's the political motion out there that is not pushing forward to that goal, and that's, like, we can sit here and talk about a lot of fucked up things, but unless we're sitting here talking about goals and how to get there, building strategy and seeing what tactics fit into that strategy, protests are good to bring people around you to help plan a thing that then you can educate those people and talk to them, like, what is a revolution? Hey, there's a revolution happening to us. It's an economic revolution happening to us, right? And so, I mean, I strayed off a little bit from what my original point of the training of the police and all that, but really, it's all related, right? Because it's reform versus revolution. And a lot of leftists are like, yeah, revolution. Like Fred Hampton said, I am a revolutionary. And it's like, yeah, he did. But we're not in the 1960s anymore. We can't just keep thinking about this working class revolution, because there's a new class of permanently unemployed and underemployed people that are dispossessed by the economy, that can't just withdraw their labor anymore or go have a big march and let the news cameras be what changes people's attitudes and opinions to then vote in different politicians or something. That process don't work anymore. And we gotta, build a different strategy.
Thank you for that, Nick. I want to get to Gina, who's had her hand up next. And then I'm glad you put your hand up, Brother Rafa, because I could see the wheels turning. I was going to call out you anyway, even if you didn't have your hand up, because I could see the wheels turning. I said, oh, Brother Rafa has something to add. So Gina, you're up next, and then Brother Rafa.
I guess you would just go back a little bit to the training in law enforcement, and then Nick brought up a good point, like what is the end goal to all of this? And I don't know, the end goal for me was to debunk the police altogether. But in reality, in 2023, is that a reality are we gonna actually get to that? And as much as I would love to say fuck yes, I don't know. You know what I mean? But what I do know is they need to stop. I don't know if Rafa knew this about me, but before when I was in Wisconsin, I actually have an associate in criminal justice. So I'm certified in law enforcement, corrections, and probation and parole. I went to school for criminal justice. And these people's fucking thought process. It was my third semester, and I was the only Mexican, of course, in my class. I remember we were talking about the kids, the crime rate in the urban cities, inner city crime rate. And I remember this girl, she raised her hand, and my professor, was a active sheriff. He was longtime sheriff. He told her to talk, and she said, well, see, the problem is, I don't know why we just don't bomb the fucking inner cities and get rid of all these fucking problematic. And I looked at her and I'm like, this is why I will never fucking go to law enforcement. I looked at her and I was like, I looked at the professor and he looked at me because he automatically, I was always the one raising my hand and starting talking shit. Like something doesn't fucking, like I clearly knew I was in the wrong, shouldn't have not got my degree in that. But I'm glad that I took it because it opened my mind to a lot of things. So I looked at her and I said, and this is the fucking mindset that you people have. And this is why the badge is fucked up. I said, in Wisconsin and different states, the requirement for law enforcement and corrections are different. So in Wisconsin, the minimum you have to have a 2-year degree in some, criminal justice. California, I'm not sure. Each state varies from state to state. My thing is, we're seeing a problem in law enforcement. We're not seeing it. It's fucking been there. The only thing is that now the technology is being broadcasted.
Right.
So it's a problem that we all know as brown people and people in general, we know has been there. The problem is if we're not gonna fucking debunk the biggest gang in the nation, these people need to be trained way better. Like the qualifications in Texas for law enforcement is you need to be 18 years old and we'll train you. You'll go through a 6-week academy. So you can have any Joe Blow off the street with the jacked up mentality, and it's just now you give them a badge and you get this really jacked up, messed up. And the same thing with like the sister said, you get people coming. I remember if you were in the military when I was in Wisconsin, if you were prior military, you got like half of the semester off because you didn't need to learn what we needed to learn because we were civilians, and it was a really good thing that you were in the military and law enforcement wants ex-military. I was like, but why? They're so fucked up. Like it never sat with
indoctrination. They had, I'm sorry, sister, to interrupt there.
No,
but
go ahead.
they had the indoctrination was already there, and they know that. It wasn't even about them getting any certain kind of privileges or what it may appear to be, but it's that we know they got the indoctrination.
Yeah. No, you're right, Nick. No training will help. How about we just get rid of these motherfuckers altogether?
I guess my point wasn't just about no training. My point is I don't think they're operating as they always have.
No, that has to change.
They never did.
No, but I'm not just saying it has to change. I'm saying that they've changed. Like law enforcement started as slave patrols, right? And then grew into the law enforcement we know today. Right after the 13th Amendment, bring people to prison, bring them right back with, prison labor to work right back on the plantations, right? But now, as a result of the new technologies, it's law enforcement as the rise of a fascist state, because we live in a post-welfare state where the system doesn't take care of us because we're a drain on the system, just the way, horses cost more money to keep alive than they can produce for us. That's exactly how we are to the ruling class. And so we're going to go and get what we need, right? we're gonna, like, you look at the 92 riots, people were going out and getting diapers at the store, right? They weren't just going and getting TVs. They were like, hey, there's an opportunity to get the shit I'm going without. And that's what the police for, like, I believed the ruling class and the committees to manage the affairs of the ruling class, i.e. the state, have been like planning, how do we prevent them from getting what they need? And it's to grow the police state. And so I think it is different, I think, and not the same police force that we've always looked at for the past, 150.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think I have something to say about that, but I first want to get to Brother Rafa because he's been waiting for a minute too and don't want to miss out.
No, no rush. I don't disagree with anybody. Actually, I think a lot of people made some good points from an educator's perspective, just reading about what Kwame went through and Crispus Attucks, even when I was there, I was like, what was he doing there? Right. I even thought about that. A lot of us used to joke, but we didn't know half of what we know today. But it's sad that how little kids are indoctrinated from a young age to read that material. And then there's nothing there that connects us to history, and we don't want to learn history, which is dangerous because then we repeat those same mistakes. But as far as what's going on, just to Nick's point, I don't disagree with Nick. I think that there are some changes that are going on, and we are in a fourth industrial revolution, but it's a technological revolution. The high tech data is the new weapons and bullets, and these new computers and the technology is the new capital that they're actually controlling. Even me as a teacher and others will sometimes be replaced. They're already trying to replace lawyers and doctors with high tech because computers are more accurate. So Nick has a point there that they don't need us. But even though now we're unemployed and a lot of us houseless or homeless, however you want to call it, or maybe just down and out, we're still we are a new class of unemployed, but we're still a class. And that is as opposed to the ruling elite, that class, the higher up class. I also agree that protesting is a controlled chaos that they know how to manage. That's why they put it on YouTube. That never been done. That's why they waited till Friday, 6 p.m. and kept prepping everybody, for the high ratings. This is coming up, this is coming up. And it was like a killing fest that they wanted to show on TV and get high ratings and sell us more Viagra or whatever they're going to sell us, who pays the bills, right? Pharma. So they played it up, but at the end too, I think, and I say this because of my travels to Cuba. Every time I go to Cuba and Mexico City, I see something, but especially in Cuba, is that if we're going to change things, it's not even going to be at the, with shotguns and guns, because the truth is they outgun us already. It's going to be our mindset. That's really what's going to come down to, because Cuba has gotten rid of the police. When I go there, they help people in Cuba. They help the elderly cross the street. They stop traffic. They escort people. They intervene when somebody needs rescuing. They're there to serve, as it says. They don't go around. They don't even carry guns. The only time I met the president, and twice I've met the president when I've gone, and even his men don't have the guns coming out. Only one time did I even see a gun on one of the not generals, but one of the guys in the military. The police over there don't run around with guns. And so it's the mindset of the people. And I think we're going to have to change that mindset, because I like what Gina had to say. When you go to the Midwest, I was shocked too, Gina, because I hear when I went there, I even went to Toronto, great people, beautiful, wonderful people. Man, don't be fooled, right? Racism runs deep, and a lot of my students told me the same things. And I had some students who were African Americans and others who were Mexican whose parents were locked up in federal penitentiaries, which is ironic, because here we have Chowchilla Women's Prison, which used to be the largest women's prison in the world, and now it's 2 prisons. But they move around. These families follow the grandma, follow grandpa, or follow their parents, and they live in these places. And they tell me similar story, like the first time that they're sitting there just minding their own business, and all of a sudden they get calls, and they're like, where'd that come from? But that's the mindset we have to change, because I'm not saying Cuba doesn't have racism, because trust me, they do. There's classism even there. When you go there, you see that, and it creeps up, you see it, but it's not as prevalent like it is here. And until we change our thinking, our way of thinking, and we won't even be able to organize following the protests. because the attacking the problem is going to be, it's going to have to come from an academic. It's going to have to come from a cultural, artistic, from the medical fields, or even from the religious, spiritual. If you believe in that approach, we got to attack it from all directions. So that mindset has to be a revolutionary mindset. And I do appreciate this kind of group and discussion, because I think this is how oftentimes it starts with young people or people who haven't been involved, or maybe anybody who just got involved, and it wakes them up. And just to, conclude this, I was yesterday, I spoke at Fresno State, I did a presentation, and I reminded the students that, they're so far ahead of us when we were young, because when we were young, we were segregated by race, and Mexicans even segregated themselves. And then, because we couldn't get along, right? But they would segregate us by race, and we had all these biases and hateful things that we said about each other. And today, they, male, female, gay, straight, they don't care, disabled, they don't care. They don't trip on that kind of stuff. And I told them I'm proud of them. And even though people call them woke, that don't stray from that. That's good to be woke, because it just simply means you're aware. Somebody's hitting you over the head with the hammer, and you're, happy-go-lucky. There's something wrong with you. You better wake up. And so I'm proud of them. And I think the younger generation, they're hungry. They want something, but it's going to be up to a lot of us, whether we're in Austin, wherever we are, Harlem. We've got to give it to them and not deprive them of that knowledge. Because that's one thing, Nick, I got mad at a lot of my elders who oftentimes will hold back information, and I was like, why? I only learned later that, well, they don't want to talk about it, or they had a problem with somebody, but you withheld information from the community that you could have shared with us, and we went through all this foolishness for a decade here, say, because of something that, so I think this information age that we live in, we do have to share the info and have a program and change the mindset. Because you're right, Nick, all the protests in the world ain't going to change it, because that's exactly where they want us.
Right. Thank you, Brother Rafa. Sister Annie, did you have something you wanted to interject?
Yes, I appreciate everybody views about this important topic, especially what's taking place now and what's going to take place, in regarding to the passing of a brother who was brutally attacked by a bunch of thugs. And like Raphael has mentioned, is, where, as far as being a revolutionary and having a new mindset, we can't just rally. We can't just go out and, state our views for the weekend, because that's being part-time. Is the fact, are you ready to commit or die for the people? And it's like, it comes down to, you got to look at what have taken place back in the 60s, where, boycotts wasn't just for a week. It went for years on end. You got to make that commitment, and like Nick has said, it got to be a new culture, a new mindset of how we're going to approach this, or else we're going to be faced with the same thing day after day, week after week, and so forth. Because when it comes down to the technology that's going to happen, oh yeah, they may get rid of cops. They may get rid of the whole law enforcement system. It's already a bad shortage there, and they're going to replace it with bionic dogs, or other robots that are going to really control the community of people, and keep us in our quote unquote place, So at that point, what can we do? How can we rally together? What do you think is best? Where, we need to live in a society of social justice and racial equality. Because my belief is, there will always be oppression as long as there are classes. We need to get rid of these classes, because nothing is going to be an equal balance of anything. Nothing. And I agree what Brother Nick is saying. I agree what Sister Gina and Brother Raphael is saying. But now we look at our tithe and we have to say, what should we do at this point? Because it's a repetitive thing from, George Floyd, everybody who have been a victim behind police brutality, behind the injustices that's taking place. And it's not going to stop.
Yeah.
Thank you, sis. Yeah.
I was just gonna say real quick, I think that you're so right of like, we got to figure out what we can do now, and that means something different for everyone, right? Like there's no yeah, I'm lucky to be like staff in the Poor People's Army, right? And I can do revolutionary work all day, every day, and it can be my life. But that's not everyone. I mean, there's lots of people, just using Poor People's Army as an example, that their role is just giving people transportation. Like when we got elders come in town, they pick them up from the airport, or they go just once in a while distribute food, or they're, make food when we have an event, or, they're a local business owner and they donate, some gift cards or different things or whatever. So I think that, we got to build, like, if we really want to build a new culture and oppose the fascist state that's rising, we have to get 50, 60 million people together. Like realistic. Yeah. That's what we have to do. If we want to have something in the streets, it's 50 million people, it's like a third of this country or something. And so it can't be just everyone being like, I'm going to live a social justice lifestyle, but, find an all-encompassing thing. That's why I said earlier, like in the chat, like can't just be police or prisons. It's got to be like human rights for everybody. And what are the violations that are happening? Police and prisons are the obvious ones, but homelessness and all these different things, and then of course what's standing in the way, but whatever.
So,
go ahead,
brother. So do you think in general that I know we don't have that much time. Matter of fact, our time is almost up with our session. But do you think that the people are more towards, I wouldn't say giving up, but it's more of a me generation where people just want to be satisfied with what they have in their lives and not see the bigger thing of what's going on? Because I'm going to tell you one thing. When it comes to Biden, he's going to really resurrect what he always wanted to put in place. And that's that anti-crime bill. He's going to turn that shit to a law. He's going to take away all the guns from people who are gun owners. He's going to put stricter laws in here. And you're going to find more people in jail over crap. Okay, I'm just reading what Brother Raphael is saying. So what do you think?
I mean, now I have a piece of candy in my mouth, sorry. But I think you're right, that Biden, wants to put these things in place, but it's just not just about Biden, right? It's not just about the president. It's not just about trying to elect someone different. Like we can look at every time it switches from a Republican to a Democrat to Republican, there's still things that are being pushed forward that are growing the fascist state. We can look at the war on drugs, right? Started by, it was pushed forward by Republicans and Democrats. We can look at welfare reform. It was, the welfare queen stuff was all Reagan and Bush one. Well, it was the Democrat, Clinton, that's the one that solidified it. Trump had the Muslim ban. It was just Biden that solidified it. So that's the thing, is the media, which 90% of media is owned by 6 corporations in this country, is able to have this sleight of hand trickery where they are able to get us to fear this thing, like fear Trump, he's the worst thing ever. And then getting a Democrat who's just pushing forth the same agenda. Like we gotta, that's why I just think it comes back to like deep study about like Rafa said, this new class of people, because it looks different. And it's going to be affecting white collar people just as much as blue collar people.
Yeah, that's a good segue to this part here that I wanted to bring to conclude us. Bringing it back to the chapter, there's the quote that Kwame mentioned it on page 84. Assata Shakur once said that the usual way the people are taught to think in America is that each subject is in a little compartment and has no relation to any other subject. For the most part, we receive fragments of unrelated knowledge, and our education follows no logical form or pattern. It is exactly this kind of education that produces people who don't have the ability to think for themselves and who are easily manipulated. And so I think the conversation that we're having it exactly speaks to that, and Nick, as you were saying earlier, that, about when we were talking about the police and the system, and, I kept thinking of this quote, the more things change, the more things stay the same. So, we have to look at things from a historical perspective and understand how we got to where we are now, to anticipate where we're going and how we can, what it is to answer that question of what is it that we can do to do that. We have to have that offense and that defense, like we had talked about in one of the last chapters. So yes, as the means of production changes, the control of the state is going to look different. So no, it's not going to look the same today as it did when it originated as a slave patrol. It's not the same. It's the means of productions is not the same. The relations of production is not the same. And so consequently, that has to change. But only the tactics change. The end goal of theirs is still the same. So that whole, it's so simple, but yet so complex, because the way that we've been taught to look at things is in silo. So you look at one particular period of time, or even a subject, you look at social studies and then you go to science separately. There's no interconnectedness. And so we don't connect the dots to things. It's like everything is just kind of like a separate piece. And so for us, we have to be able to not only know our history, when we talk about ourselves being Chicano nationalist, African nationalist, what have you, it's not just about knowing your history and being proud of who you are, but we also have to merge that with the science and look at things from a scientific perspective so that we understand, how did we get here and where are we going? What do we anticipate and what do we do next? So,
Right.
I just want to say I appreciate every single one of you guys, and this kind of dialogue is always so enriching. And as it's just us five here, but it will be shared later. And for other people who are watching, we just want to encourage you, Brother Nick, as you were saying, it just requires study, and hopefully something here has been said that kind of sparks that for people. And you can reach out to any one of us or people in your local community, get onto the website, you guys share, and we can keep building. And so with that, if there are no final comments, I just want to honor everybody's time, and we are at 6 minutes past 2 hours, which is our max. So if nobody else has anything.
I just want to quickly say, someone has said that we need to do more work and less talk. And I just want to reiterate, no, you do more talk. This is how you plan. This is how you come together. This is how you organize. You do as much talking as you can to initiate as much work as you can to come together. So this way we have a plan, because marching down the street for one day over the weekend is not going to resolve anything. We have to look at this matter very serious, because technology going to take over, even in the healthcare industry. Black power.
All power to the people. Nick, did you want to interject here?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we're starting a new education series that's gonna go for 8 weeks. That one of our founders, Sherry Hunkela, is gonna be teaching the art of revolution, asking important questions like, what does the opioid crisis have to do with automation? You know, what is revolution? Is political reform possible? All these questions is stuff we're gonna be talking about. I just put the
Good.
flyer in the chat.
I did see that on Facebook. Is it going to be open to everyone? Or is it just?
It is, but we're asking folks to sign up, and that's how we'll send you the link when you sign up. So
Okay, put it in that chat group, please.
I will. I'll put it in there. But
Right.
thanks
All
for
right.
the discussion. This is great, y'all.
Yes, thank you all. All power to the
Everybody.
people.
Black
Oh.
Power.
Night.
You want me to count down?
See you soon.
You want me to count down?
Sure.
Okay. All right. I thank everyone. This was very informative. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Black Power.